the lowest inventories of food we have in 50 years. Listen, there's a shortage of everything in the agriculture world, including farmers. Most farmers are old men. It's been a horrible business for the last 30 years, Bernie. That's in the process of changing. We have to have higher prices of food, or we're not going to have any food at any price. The people who are going to be making the most money in the next 10, 20, 30 years are going to be the people in the agricultural business, because it has been so horrible for the past 30 years.
You've been talking to me on the shows I host, along with, obviously, right now here on The Edge about this. I mean, you really do believe that there's going to be an agrarian revolt of some kind.
There's going to be
year zero? Go ahead.
And there's going to be an agrarian revival. Whether it's revolt or not, I don't know, because nobody's been becoming farmers. We're having huge shortages develop, and the only way you're going to get more production and more supplies is for prices to go up. Bernie, you're not going to go into the fields and work for, $5 a day. It's hot and horrible work right now. But if the prices go high enough, a lot of people, instead of going to Wall Street, will go into agriculture. You know as well as I do, the next generation of farmers are going to own the Lamborghinis. They're going to buy them. They're going to take them over from the stockbrokers who are going to be driving taxis or driving tractors. The world is changing. It has done this many times in history. It's not unusual. It's happening again.
I'm not sure whether I'm sure we've discussed this before, but wouldn't you be? I mean, it sounds like you almost sound like a cheerleader for ADM and Monsanto. I think I brought this up with you before. Anybody who can increase crop yields, anybody who can increase the efficiency of farming should be a winner if they buy your argument.
Well, if you buy the right companies that can execute, yes. I happen to buy the commodity products themselves rather than the stocks, but if you're a good stock picker, sure, you'll make a fortune if you buy the right companies. There's no question about that.
Okay, here's one from Sam here, because you mentioned China, you mentioned agriculture. Let's put the two together for a second here, if you would. Sam says that you said before you like China stocks and China farming issues. I'm having trouble finding good China agricultural stocks. I've found China Green Agriculture and Zhongpin Incorporated, but they seem a little pricey. Any ideas? And before you say don't pick stocks, I remember you as the thin little guy on Wall Street Week, and over long term your stock picks went up. What? He's still a thin little guy. Sam, what are you talking about? Jim.
No, Sam, I'm not as thin as I was then. I wish I were. I'm glad you reminded me. Well, there are fertilizer companies, there are diesel diesel engine companies. There are companies which actually produce agricultural products in China. Landowners, for instance, people who run farms. There are many ways, seed companies. There are many ways to play this in agriculture in China. Just do a little more searching, a little more digging, and you'll find plenty of ways to play.
Okay, let's see what else.
Move to China and become a farmer.
Wow, but you'd have to learn the language then. But you're doing that, right? I mean, you got to bank that on the future here.
My daughters are doing that. Yes, I'm not very good at it.
You mean you're telling me you're encouraging your daughters to go to farming school and become farmers in China?
No, they're learning Chinese. My daughter's 5. One of my daughters is 1. One of my daughters is 5. I'm not teaching them to be farmers, not yet.
Well, they're already playing a sandbox. They probably had dirt under the fingernails. What better time than now to really get the thought, to plant the seed, no pun intended, in their head there. Okay, here's one from, since we're talking about China, Jim, George in Melbourne asked, my wife and I are retiring to Shanghai. We're 43. What do you call your babies? We want to buy more yuan and have 80% of our investments in China. Do you think that's smart, Jim?
Well, George, yes, I think it's a very, very smart thing to do. You have to be aware that Shanghai has horrible air pollution, but other than that, no, I think that China is the place to be. I think you're very smart to go there. You're going to find some opportunities. I don't know what you're good at, but whatever you're good at, you're going to see lots of opportunities in Shanghai going forward, and everybody watching this show should be envying you.
Would you move there if they clean up the air 50%, Jim? That's your biggest gripe in the world is dirty air. That's why I talk to you over there so much, because you don't want to live here.
Right. Well, we live in Singapore because Singapore has lots of things going for it. But Shanghai and Hong Kong have just terrible air. So as long as the air is terrible, even though we love Shanghai and love Hong Kong, we're not going to move there because of the air.
Hey, Rob from Charleston, must be South Carolina, right? USA. Can domestic demand in the growing middle class of China add to the aggressive stimulus that they're sticking in, lead to a sustainable commodity rally, specifically in crude oil? I think in so many words, Rob, Jim has answered that, and it's a resounding yes. Right, Jim?
Well, absolutely. As I said, the supply of commodities are going down at a time when even if demand doesn't rise with supply going down, you still can have a bull market in commodities. Now, China's not a big enough economy to save the world, but they're certainly doing their best to save themselves and probably will.
Okay. Case enclosed there, open and shut. Jane writes from the troubled state of Michigan, where the U.S. car industry is born. Which would Jim rather hold to the end of the year, gold or oil? Now we're starting to give you multiple choice questions, Jim. Can you handle them?
Well, I would rather have, of those two, I'd rather have oil because, you know, the IMF is trying to sell its gold, and the IMF is one of the largest holders of gold in the world. So you've got this huge supply overhang. Whether they sell it or not, the world is expecting them to sell it. So I'd rather own oil than gold in that context. I'd rather own agriculture than either, but oil.
Back to the gold thing before we move on here. You don't believe that that reserves and resources are underreported as the antitrust coalition people would purport?
Well, even if they are, I don't, but even if they are, we know that the IMF has huge reserves of gold, which they're desperately trying to sell. All they have to do is get 2 or 3 more people to approve it, and they'll be selling a gigantic amount of gold. Now, Bernie, I think it's wonderful that they're going to sell their gold because, A, it'll knock the price down and we can all buy some cheaper, and then the IMF will be out of money and we'll eventually get rid of the IMF.
There we go. Perfect. It's a Goldilocks story in the end. And Carlos writes in, real estate in emerging markets, BRIC countries, Brazil, Russia, India, China. Jim, go or don't go?
Well, I would certainly think about buying real estate in China or even Brazil. Not India and Russia are not for me. I know that many people confuse them all and think they're all the same. They're far, far from it. If you can buy real estate in natural resource areas of China or Brazil, I think you're going to make a fortune over the next decade or two.
Okay.
I wouldn't buy. By the way, I wouldn't buy real estate. I wouldn't buy real estate in Shanghai or Beijing or some of the places where the bubble developed. But in some of the other parts of China, yes, definitely.
I was just telling you during the commercial break you should start looking at Hong Kong real estate because it's coming off so badly. You might be able to get your palace overlooking the bay, and then down the line they'll shut all the factories in the Pearl River Delta. It'll clean up, and you can move your family here and live happily ever after.
It's only rich guys like you could afford that, Bernie, not me.
Stop it. Stop it. Stop it. We live in a small place. You can afford a big place. George asks, I've been a long-term investor on the African continent, but I'm getting bullish on Angola and Ethiopia. What do you think?
Well, George, I'm very bullish on Angola and Ethiopia myself. If there were 6 of me, 1 of me would be living in Angola right now. Angola is a gigantic country. It used to be huge in agriculture before the war. They're going to be the largest producer of oil in Africa. No, I see fantastic opportunities in both of those countries.
Okay, a couple more to go. Bob asks, and this is more of an attitude question here, I guess. Jim Bob says, why do you, Jim, keep bad-mouthing the U.S. from Asia? Tell them that the competent will replace the telling them the competent will replace the incompetent doesn't really give them a lot of ideas. It's kind of like throwing your hands up, I guess, is what Bob is saying, and hoping that Darwin's Law or Murphy's Law, I forget which one, takes over.
Well, Bob, I think that people who have failed and are incompetent, I don't like giving my tax money. I'm an American citizen just like you, I guess. I don't like giving my money to people who fail to prop up bad assets. I think if America, if all of us U.S. taxpayers gave money to people who were competent and have done things right, there are lots of banks in America that have done things right, lots of insurance companies, lots of stockbrokers that have been waiting for this opportunity. Unfortunately, now they're suffering because all of our money is going to incompetent people to prop up bad assets. No, I think that's a terrible mistake economically, morale and morality as well. I'm not criticizing the U.S. I'm criticizing the policies that the politicians in Washington are doing because I think it's a terrible waste of your tax money and mine to throw good money after bad. That's not the way the world's supposed to work, and that's not going to revive the system.
Jim, you a happy man today? I've seen you smile more before. You're a happy man. You're a happy guy, happy camper.
No, yeah, I'm going to go home and take my little girl to school in a little while. Yeah, I'm very happy.
All right. You bring a signed, autographed copy of that book, okay, with you on your trip. I'll see you in a couple of weeks, and we'll break bread together, and it'll be a very, very different world then. Until then, you keep well, my friend, okay? Jim Rogers.
Thank you, Bernie.
Hear more Bloomberg News reports on the Bloomberg Terminal at AV Go, on Bloomberg Television, and on Bloomberg Radio.